Right now at 6:47, want to give you a live look for Milwaukee this morning. In this building later tonight, former President Donald Trump is set to address a packed Republican National Convention, last day of the big four-day event. And that's where we find, as we have all week, our Joe St. George live for us this morning. Of course, this is the grand finale, and it's a big one, too. First major speech for the former president since the attempt on his life over the weekend. What are we expecting to hear from Donald Trump later tonight, Joe?
Well, we know he gave an interview following his assassination attempt where he said there's going to be rewrites to the speech as a direct result of what unfolded in Pennsylvania last weekend. So there was one speech that was prepared and written last week. There is another speech that's going to be delivered tonight. Former President Trump has said he believes this is an opportunity to perhaps unite America, unite the world. Not exactly his calling card when he's in arenas like this with some of his most passionate supporters. Remember who goes to Republican National Conventions. These are your most devoted supporters, your devoted fan bases, if you will. Typically, when he's in a crowd full of his base, it can be an adversarial speech. But there is at least going to be an effort in the previews of what the speech is going to be tonight, of an effort to really perhaps set a different tone than he has in the past. I do think tone. Temperament is something we're to keep an eye on. I've covered former President Trump his entire political career. I remember covering some of his first political rallies when I was a reporter over in Richmond. And he has struck me as a bit more subdued, bit more emotional throughout this week, coming into the arena, waving to the crowds. We shall see if that translates into his speech this evening as well. But think about for a moment what he will do tonight. He will accept his party's nomination for the third straight time. That puts him in very rare company. Only Thomas Jefferson, Richard Nixon has done that for the Republican Party. A few Democrats have done that as well, but it's very rare air for that to happen. And it will also complete a political comeback, a pretty big one. Think about where he was within the Republican Party on January 6, 2021. 6 weeks or so ago, he was convicted of 34 felonies. So everything that he's dealt with just within the last 4 years or so, culminating in what will be a very boisterous crowd here in Milwaukee as he accepts his party's nomination.
Boisterous, probably an understatement, I'm sure, once the former president gets up on that stage. Joe, we're also following updates on the other side as well. President Biden facing more calls to step aside as the nominee. Of course, he had the COVID diagnosis yesterday. So what's happening with the Democratic side?
Well, this was the biggest story in American politics last week, prior to the assassination attempt, prior to the start of the RNC. It's taken a bit of a backseat, but it has roared itself back to really being probably the big story because there's uncertainty with this. We know that former President Trump's going to accept the nomination tonight. We have a feel of what that is going to be like. What we don't know, I can't report with 100% certainty that President Biden will be the Democratic nominee in the end. We have to get to Chicago. President Biden has to get to Chicago before we can say that with certainty. And the reality is that we're still several weeks away from the Democratic convention. President Biden continues to say that he believes that he's the best person to beat former President Trump, and he has told those who've called for him to step aside that he is running and that is his decision. But the drumbeat is only intensifying. Multiple reporting suggests that Democratic leaders have met with President Biden or spoken with him privately to outline how dire the polling is right now. There's polls out this morning showing Trump up in the Commonwealth of Virginia. All of this translating into really let's just say less than ideal polling for President Biden with 100-plus days to go until the election. But, Blaine, there's 100-plus days to go. A lot can change, and 2024 seems to be like an election unlike any other.
Anything can happen, and we know you and our entire Scripps News political team will be watching it for us 24/7. Joe St. George live at the RNC this morning at 6:51.